Stream 2. Now, we've talked a lot about Nord Stream 2.
You know, if they didn't have double standards, they would have no standards at all.
It literally, as they're giving speeches, the filibuster is racist. Let's filibuster this. Like, simultaneously. And I got to say, it was amazing. So this vote, the vote we had last week, was a big, big deal on Nord Stream 2.
So this is about this pipeline, and it's really about the future of Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis the West.
Yeah, so the history of it, we've talked a lot about Ukraine on this show. We started off 2 years ago with impeachment and Ukraine and Burisma, and we talked about how Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union.
Right.
And when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine became an independent nation. Ukrainians don't like the Russians. The Russians want to control and dominate Ukraine and many of their neighbors, most of their neighbors. And Putin, look, Putin is a KGB thug. He has said one of the most candid things he's ever said is he said that he thinks the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century was the dissolution of the Soviet Union.
Right.
And so Putin longs to reassemble the Soviet Union and have Russia. He wants Soviet greatness again. And if you're reassembling the Soviet Union, there's nothing you want more than Ukraine. Ukraine is the breadbasket.
Right.
Now, Putin has invaded Ukraine before. He did it in 2014. You remember Crimea?
Right.
That's part of Ukraine. Putin marched in and invaded it and took it over.
And kept it.
And kept it.
Yep.
But he stopped. He didn't continue invading Ukraine. He stopped short. Why did he stop short? Well, the reason is that right now, Russia's major export is natural gas and oil. That's Putin is basically a petro-tyrant. And to get his natural gas to Europe, who's the major consumer of it, it goes through pipelines that go right through Ukraine. So Putin's sitting there going, well, if I march into Ukraine, they could damage or destroy those pipelines. And if they damage or destroy those pipelines, suddenly Russia can't get the gas to Europe and we're screwed.
Right.
So Putin was mad because he's like, I want to invade them, but they've got a stranglehold on our ability to get gas to Europe. So suddenly I can't invade them. So what did he do? The next year, Putin launched a project called Nord Stream 2. And it was, let's build an undersea pipeline that skips Ukraine altogether, goes under the ocean, and goes straight from Russia to Germany. And that pipeline, once it's complete, we don't have to worry about Ukraine and the energy infrastructure. We can march in and take it over because we can get our gas to Europe. Well, 2 years ago, I introduced bipartisan legislation to stop it. Passed it through Congress. Trump signed it into law, and we stopped the pipeline. We won. The pipeline was dead, buried, stopped, kaput for over a year.
Yeah.
Then Joe Biden came into office, and Biden surrendered. He capitulated to Putin.
Yeah.
Putin began rebuilding the pipeline literally on January 24th, 2021.
I'm glad he took a nice long weekend, you know, a few days, and then starts up again.
4 days after Biden sworn in. So the pipeline right now is completed. So Putin has finished it because Biden formally waived the sanctions. But it's still awaiting certification in Europe. So they can't turn it on until the regulatory agents have certified it.
Yeah.
And so I introduced legislation to reimpose the sanctions, to overturn Biden's surrender to Putin. Now, twice I've introduced legislation like this before, and twice it's passed essentially unanimously. Every Democrat has supported it twice. We had a big battle in December. I was holding dozens of State Department nominees. We're there till 1 in the morning. I'm negotiating with Chuck Schumer. I said, all right, I'm going to lift 32 holds. Let these nominees go through in exchange for scheduling the vote on Nord Stream 2 that we had just last week. Schumer gave in, scheduled the vote. They did not want that vote. The Biden White House was lobbying against it like crazy.
Because even if the Democrats win the vote, then they're all on the record of saying, Ukraine, see you later.
That's exactly right. And they, for 2 years, had been squarely against Nord Stream 2. This is a vote. When Trump was president, every Democrat was for these sanctions.
Right.
The only thing there's two things that are different. Number one, instead of a Republican with an R behind his name, or a president with an R behind his name, there's a president with a D behind his name. Now that it's a Democrat, suddenly the Democrats support Russia. And number two, there are over 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. Any day now, we could see the Ukrainian invasion by Russia. And they have to do it in about the next month or so, because as we get into the spring, the land starts to thaw and the Russian tanks get stuck in the mud. So their window to invade is narrow. But we voted on it. It was amazing. We ended up, so I won the vote, won a substantial bipartisan majority of the Senate. The vote was 55 to 44. So every Republican voted yes except Rand Paul, and Rand Paul pretty much opposes all sanctions. So I got all Republicans but Rand. Yeah. And on the Democratic side, 6 Democrats voted with me. So it was 55 to 44. It was a big bipartisan majority.
We're not living in a particularly bipartisan era, so that's impressive.
Now, 55 is not 60. And so the Democrats filibustered and said, you don't have 60, you don't get to pass it. Now, here's another interesting thing. There are a number of Democrats who are in vulnerable elections, who are on the ballot in November. Every single Democrat in a vulnerable election in November voted with me. So, Mark Kelly in Arizona voted for my sanctions on Russia. Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada voted for my sanctions in Nevada on Russia. Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire voted for my sanctions against Russia. Even Raphael Warnock, one of the most liberal senators in the Senate, voted for my sanctions against Russia because he didn't want to tell the voters of Georgia in November, yeah, I voted to support Putin because I'm a Democrat.
Right.
We got 6 Democrats. You know who we didn't get? Manchin or Sinema.
Huh. They're doing enough.
So what was amazing, the day of the vote, Biden came to the Capitol. He had lunch with all the Democratic senators the day of the vote, and Joe Biden was personally lobbying the Democratic senators to vote against Cruz's sanctions on Russia.
Wow.
And so it's actually, I mean, you said it tongue-in-cheek, but it's actually true. I just think Manchin and Sinema felt they couldn't stand up to the White House and anything else. They were getting so pounded on everything else.
We've killed your legislative agenda, so we'll let you have
and look, I didn't like that they voted no, but I'll give them a mulligan because they are saving the Republic on other sides.
Yeah.
But the Democrats are literally, this is not hyperbole, they are literally acquiescing in Russia wiping Ukraine off.